Close your eyes, can you hear it? The soft clink of glass bottles hitting your doorstep before sunrise. The distant melody of a transistor radio crackling to life with that unmistakable Mersey beat. The whistle of the coalman echoing down cobblestone streets. If those sounds just sent a wave of nostalgia crashing over you, you know this isn't just another history lesson. This is your childhood. This is what it felt like to grow up in Britain during the most revolutionary decade of the 20th century. The 1960s weren't just 10 years on a calendar. They were a complete transformation of everything you thought you knew about being British. These 10 memories will hit you like lightning straight to the heart. Before alarm clocks became our morning torturers, there was a gentler wake-up call. Picture this, it's 5:30 a.m., and the world is painted in shades of grey. Then you hear it, the gentle percussion of glass bottles dancing in a metal crate, the steady clip-clop of horse hooves, or the low purr of an electric milk float gliding down your street. This wasn't just milk delivery. This was the heartbeat of British trust. Your milkman knew your family better than most relatives. He knew when someone was ill because bottles piled up. He knew celebrations because you'd leave notes asking for extra cream. Some families had the same milkman for decades, a relationship built on punctuality and cold bottles of goodness. The bottles were works of art. Thick glass that caught morning light, topped with foil caps kids collected like treasure. Red tops, silver tops, gold tops. Each one told you about your family's place in the world. Nothing from a supermarket shelf has matched milk that traveled just miles from cow to doorstep. Here's what younger generations will never understand. The milkman wasn't just delivering dairy. He was delivering security, routine, and the comforting knowledge that some things in this rapidly changing world would always be exactly where you expected them. Forget about piercings or tattoos. In the 60s, the most rebellious thing a young man could do was let his hair touch his collar. The hair revolution didn't happen overnight. It crept down British necks 1 millimeter at a time, causing domestic warfare. One day, your son looked like a respectable gentleman. Next, he looked like he'd joined a rock band, and parents saw this as joining a criminal gang. Teachers measured hair with rulers. Employers turned away qualified candidates because their fringe was too long. Fathers threatened to drag sons to the barber. But boys held firm, and British masculinity changed forever. The Beatles started it, but it wasn't about copying them. It was about freedom of expression in a country that had spent centuries defining exactly how a proper British man should look. Long hair meant you refused to be identical to your father. It meant you had ideas about beauty, rebellion, and what it meant to be young in a world finally listening to your generation. Barbershops lost business, while hair salons started catering to men. Parents eventually gave up the fight. But not before thousands of dinner-table arguments ending with slammed doors and teenagers storming upstairs to play records even louder. If you were a lad in the 60s, you remember that first time looking in the mirror and realizing you looked nothing like your father. And for the first time in your life, that felt exactly right. Before Netflix, before video games, before the internet, Saturday morning belonged to one thing: the pictures. Every Saturday, like clockwork, British kids lined up outside cinemas with sixpence and anticipation. Saturday morning pictures weren't just entertainment, they were sacred ritual, bringing together children from every social divide. The program was always the same. Serial adventures, leaving you hanging for a week, cartoons making you laugh until your sides hurt, comedy shorts adults never understood, and sometimes cowboy films making you want to gallop home on imaginary horses. But real magic happened in the audience. Hundreds of kids shouting warnings to heroes, booing villains with genuine passion, erupting in cheers when good triumphed. It was pure democracy. If the audience didn't like something, everyone knew about it. Cinema managers were part ringmaster, part teacher, part entertainer. They knew every face, remembered which kids tried sneaking in without paying, somehow maintaining order among organized chaos. Between films, they ran competitions, birthday celebrations, and sing-alongs heard 3 streets away. For many kids, Saturday morning pictures were their first taste of independence. You saved your money, made your way there, chose your seat, and for 3 hours, lived in worlds more exciting than reality could offer. There was a moment when British television grew fangs, and suddenly, no one was safe from satire. That was the week. Didn't just change television, it changed what it meant to be British. For the first time in broadcasting history, a program dared suggest politicians, royalty, and institutions might be worth laughing at. The establishment trembled. Audiences couldn't get enough. Saturday nights at 10:30 p.m. became appointment television. Families gathered around black and white sets, waiting to see which sacred cow would be slaughtered next. David Frost and his team took aim at everyone with surgical precision and wicked humor. This wasn't gentle comedy. This was revolutionary. In a country where respect for authority was woven into national DNA, TWW3 suggested authority should earn respect rather than demand it. The show made heroes of skeptics and turned cynicism into art. Politicians never questioned in public suddenly, found policies dissected, personalities mocked, pompous statements turned into punchlines. The program didn't just entertain, it educated. It taught ordinary British people they had every right to question those in power. The show was eventually cancelled. But its impact was permanent. British humour became sharper, more political, more willing to punch upward. It paved the way for everything from Monty Python to Have I Got News for You, proving laughter could be the most powerful form of protest. Mary Quant didn't just raise hell-lines, she raised hell with traditional British fashion. The miniskirt wasn't just clothing. It was a declaration of independence worn by an entire generation of British women tired of dressing like their mothers. When hemlines shot from knee-length to thriveling, it wasn't about showing more leg, it was about showing more attitude. Young women in the 60s were entering the workforce in unprecedented numbers. They had their own money, opinions, and ideas about how to present themselves. The miniskirt became their uniform of rebellion. Carnaby Street boutiques couldn't keep them in stock. Office dress codes were hastily rewritten. Conservative newspapers launched moral crusades. Church leaders delivered sermons about modesty, but girls kept buying, hemlines kept rising. What made miniskirts truly revolutionary wasn't just length, it was democracy. Unlike expensive, structured fashion before, miniskirts were simple, affordable, and easy to make at home. Working-class girls could look as fashionable as aristocrats. Age stopped mattering. Social class became irrelevant. What mattered was confidence, and miniskirts gave women permission to be bold. The controversy was fierce but brief. Within years, what seemed scandalously short became completely normal. But for women who wore those first miniskirts, they represented something more significant than fashion. They represented the right to make choices about their own bodies, image, and future. Before central heating conquered Britain, warmth came one sooty sack at a time. The arrival of the coal man was both anticipated and dreaded. Anticipated because it meant warmth for another week. Dreaded because coal dust settled on everything and the lingering smell of sulfur clung to clothes. Children pressed faces to windows, watching this grimy hero heave hundredweight sacks from his lorry to your coal shed. He was part beast of burden, part neighborhood fixture, completely essential to British survival. His arms were massive, his back bent from years of carrying weight. His face permanently painted with coal dust no scrubbing could remove. The ritual was always the same. The thunderous sound of coal cascading into your bunker. The cloud of black dust was settling on everything within 50 yards. The careful counting of sacks to ensure you got what you paid for. And always, the cup of tea your mother offered, because no matter how busy, the coalman deserved proper hospitality. Homes smelled different then. Coal smoke mixed with cooking food and dampness that was just British life. Central heating was for rich people and Americans. Real families knew the art of banking. Fires to last through the night, and coaxing flames from yesterday's ashes. The coal man knew your family's habits better than relatives. He knew when money was tight because orders got smaller. He knew when someone was ill because fires burned day and night. He was part of the invisible network of working people who kept Britain functioning. One sooty delivery at a time. 4 lads from Liverpool didn't just cross the Atlantic, they conquered it. The British invasion wasn't planned. It wasn't orchestrated by record executives or marketing committees. It was pure magic when British teenagers picked up guitars and decided they had something to say to the world. For the first time in popular music history, American teenagers copied British accents. The Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Kinks, the Who. These weren't just bands, they were ambassadors of cool that could only come from Britain. They proved you didn't need Hollywood glamour or Nashville twang to make music that mattered. British boys from council houses and terraced streets suddenly sold millions of records in America. Working-class accents became exotic and appealing. The underdog nation that had lost an empire found itself leading a cultural revolution instead. Every household had at least one transit. Every teenager knew exactly which pirate radio station played the best music. Radio Luxembourg, crackling through static at night, brought sounds the BBC would never broadcast. You'd fall asleep with your radio under your pillow, dreaming of becoming the next British band to conquer the world. The music wasn't just entertainment, it was identity. Which band you supported said everything about who you were, who you wanted to be, which side of the generational divide you stood on. Parents couldn't understand why children screamed at concerts or needed every single and album. But teenagers understood perfectly. This was their music, their revolution, their moment to change the world. They didn't just dress well, they made style into a military operation. Being a mod wasn't a hobby, it was a lifestyle demanding absolute commitment to looking perfect every single moment of every day. While parents wore comfortable, practical clothes, mods treated fashion like a full-time job, requiring precision, dedication, and considerable financial sacrifice. The Italian scooter was more than transportation, it was art. Vespas and Lambrettas weren't just customized, they were transformed into rolling sculptures covered in mirrors, lights, and chrome accessories that caught light and turned heads everywhere. The number of mirrors on your scooter directly reflected your status in the mod hierarchy. Friday nights meant gathering at specific cafes, comparing outfits, discussing where to buy perfect narrow-legged trousers or the sharpest cut jacket. Saturday meant riding in formation to seaside towns. A convoy of perfectly dressed teenagers on perfectly maintained machines, looking like they'd stepped from an Italian fashion magazine. The attention to detail was obsessive. Every crease had to be sharp. Every button had to shine. Hair had to be cut exactly right and styled to perfection. Shoes had to be polished to mirror brightness. Being a mod meant never ever looking anything less than immaculate. The weekend. Battles with rockers at Brighton and other seaside towns made headlines, but they missed the real story. This wasn't just teenage violence, it was a clash between two completely different philosophies of what it meant to be young and British. Mods represented the future. Clean, sophisticated, continental. Rockers represented the past, rough, rebellious. American-influenced. British cinema stopped pretending life was glamorous and started showing how it actually was for decades. British films had been about upper-class people doing upper-class things in upper-class places. Then suddenly, in the early 1960s, cameras turned toward terraced houses, factory floors, and corner pubs. Kitchen sink realism didn't just show working-class life, it celebrated it. Films like Saturday Night and Sunday Morning and A Taste of Honey were revolutionary, not because they were technically innovative, but because they treated ordinary people as if their stories mattered. Factory workers became heroes. Teenage pregnancy became plot points worth exploring. Family arguments in cramped kitchens became compelling drama. For the first time, British audiences saw themselves reflected on cinema screens. Not idealized versions or comic caricatures, but real recognition of real lives lived by real people. The accents were authentic. The problems were familiar. The emotions were genuine. These films didn't offer easy answers or happy endings tied with ribbons. They showed life as messy, complicated, and often frustrating. But they also showed it as dignified, meaningful, and worth paying attention to. Working-class characters weren't comic relief or background decoration. They were complex human beings dealing with complex problems. The movement was short-lived, but its impact was permanent. British cinema learned that ordinary stories could be extraordinary when told with honesty and respect. It paved the way for everything from Ken Loach to Mike Leigh, proving that the most powerful stories are often the ones happening right next. British men discovered color, and their wardrobes would never be the same again. For generations, British men dressed like undertakers: black, grey, navy, brown. The more boring, the more respectable. Then the 1960s arrived, and suddenly men wore purple velvet jackets, floral shirts, and ruffled sleeves that would have been considered feminine just years earlier. The peacock revolution wasn't just about clothes, it was about permission. Permission to be beautiful, to be expressive, to be noticed. Boutiques like Granny Takes a Trip and designers like Michael Fish didn't just sell fashion. They sold a new kind of masculinity that didn't require being invisible. Office workers, who had spent decades in identical grey suits, suddenly appeared in paisley ties and coloured shirts. Teenagers saved for Chelsea boots and velvet trousers. Even conservative fathers wondered if perhaps that bright blue shirt might not be such a bad idea. The transformation was radical and rapid. Men's fashion magazines appeared for the first time. Department stores created entire sections dedicated to men's fashion beyond basic necessities. Advertising began targeting men as consumers, who might care about appearance rather than just functionality. Critics called it feminine, inappropriate, unprofessional. But the men buying these clothes knew better. They weren't trying to be women, they were trying to be more interesting men. They rejected the idea that masculinity required invisibility and chose instead to be bold, confident, and memorable. The revolution succeeded because it gave men something they hadn't realized they wanted: the right to be beautiful. These weren't just memories, they were the building blocks of a cultural revolution that changed Britain forever. If you lived through the 1960s, you didn't just witness history. You were part of the most exciting transformation any generation has experienced. Every clink of milk bottles, every argument about hair length, every Saturday at the pictures, every satirical joke, every miniskirt that shocked your grandmother, every coal delivery that kept you warm, every British song on American radio, every perfectly pressed mod outfit, every honest film about real life, and every splash of color in a man's wardrobe was part of something bigger. You were part of the generation that taught Britain how to be young, how to be rebellious, how to be beautiful, and how to be proud of being different. And that's a legacy worth remembering.